Book 3. Much of this book consists of criticism of the ritual improprieties of the three families that also tell us much about ritual in general. A related theme is the need for cultural refinement to be accompanied by native substance, that is, traditional practices must be informed by genuine feeling if they are to be more than mere empty gestures. The problem with Confucius' contemporaries is not only that they floated proper ritual forms, but also that even when they observed them, they did so insincerely. They are thus lacking when it comes both to cultural refinement and native substance. Confucius said to the Ji family, they have 8 rows of dancers performing in their courtyard. If they can condone this, what are they not capable of? According to later ritual texts, different ranks in society were allowed different numbers of dancers to perform outside the ancestral hall during ceremonial occasions. The Son of Heaven allowed 8 rows of the 8 dancers, feudal lords 6 rows, minister 4 rows, and officials 2 rows. Although he was de facto ruler of law, the head of G family officially held only the position of minister, and his use of 8 dancers thus represented an outrageous usurpation of the ritual prerogatives of the Zhou king. When making offering to their ancestors, the three families had the young Ode performing during the clearing away the sacrificial vessels. The master quoted a line from the Ode. Assisting were the feudal lords, the Son of Heaven, solemn and stately, adding, what relevance could this possibly have to the ancestral hall of the three families? The young Ode is number 282, and as Confucius points out by quoting one of its couplets, describes the court of the Son of Heaven, as Brooks and Brooks note. The two preceding lines in the stanza are slow and solemn, they draw night till aural range in panoply. As a recessional hymn, it was probably sung by a chorus who narrated as though it were happening, the sacrifice that had just concluded. Here again we have an instance of the three families usurping the ritual prerogatives of the Zhou king. The master said, a man who is not good, what has he to do with ritual? A man who is not good, what has he to do with music? Although it serves as a general statement concerning the relationship of internal disposition of Confucian practice, this comment is probably more specifically directed at the head of the Ji family and the other leading families of Lu criticized in 3132, a passage in the history of the Han. After quoting this line explains, the point is that a person who is not good doesn't have the means to apply himself. Not having the means to apply himself, he is unable to practice ritual and music. Even if he has many other talents, they will only be used to do no good. During the Master's age, ritual and music were under attack by ministers of Lu, who greedily usurped the prerogatives of the king and mutually followed the established habits of corruption and practiced wrongness so that it triumphed over what was right. Lin Fang asked about the rules of ritual. The master exclaimed, what a noble question. When it comes to ritual, it is better to be spare than extravagant. When it comes to mourning, it is better to be excessively sorrowful than fastidious. Lin Fang is usually identified as a man of Lu, and presumably shared Confucius' concern that his fellow citizens were neglecting the roots and attending to the superficial branches of ritual practice, which is why he is condemned by Confucius for his question. When it comes to the ritual, is it harmony that is valued? But if one is to err, it should be one of side of the roots, that is, the emotions that ideally inform and motivate the ritual forms. Sparse ritual paraphernalia backed by genuine respect is better than empty ritual excess, and grief-induced lapses in ritual forms of mourning are more easily contented than cool, emotionless perfection. Zhu Xi is probably correct in linking this theme to the relationship of emotional substance over cultural form described in 618, although here in Book 3 the importance of substance over cultural form is emphasized by Confucius. In other passages, we see form being stressed over substance. Probably the desirability of both being balanced that is expressed in 618 is Confucius' ultimate position, and his favoring of one over another is merely a response to the pedagogical needs of the moment. The master said the Yi and the barbarians, even with their rulers, are still inferior to the Chinese states without their rulers. The Yi and Di were tribes living to the east and north, respectively, of China proper in Confucius' time. They had some sort of political organization, but didn't follow the rituals of the Zhou. Hong Kong, on the others, are probably correct in seeing this as another jibe at the three families of Lu. They wield political power, as do the barbarian rulers, but their breaches of ritual property make them no better than the Yi or Di, and it will be preferably for Lu to remain ritually correct, even if this meant going without any ruler at all. The head of the Ji family made a sacrificial pilgrimage to Mount Tai. The master said to Ranqiu, "Were you not able to prevent this?" Ranqiu replied, "I was not." The master exclaimed, "Oh, that one would ever have to say that Mount Tai was not the equal of Ling Fang." Mount Tai is one of the sacred mountains of China, located in present-day Shandong province. The offering of sacrifices to sacred mountains in the form of food and jade items was the prerogative of the feudal lord who ruled the region in which the mountain was located. Mount Tai straddled the border of Lu and Qi and received from both states. The head of the Ji family, of course, was a minister and not a feudal lord, and so its offering represented a violation of ritual norms. At the time, Ranqiu was serving as an official under the head of the Ji family, and thus was in a position to dissuade him from the ritual error, but he apparently lacked the courage or influence. Bao Xian explains the master's closing moment. Spirits do not accept offerings that violate ritual. Even Lin Fang previously knew enough to ask about ritual, so how could anyone imagine that the spirit of Mount Tai would somehow be less perspicacious than he? It was with a desire to slander of Mount Tai that his sacrifice was performed. The master said, "Surely archery can serve as an illustration of the fact that the gentleman doesn't compete. Before mounting the stairs to the archery hall, gentlemen bow and defer to one another, and after descending from the hall, they mutually offer up toast. This is how a gentleman competes." Archery was one of the classic six arts in which a gentleman was trained. It was a highly ritualized activity, with careful attention being given to age and rank, and everyone participating in a formal drinking ceremony at the conclusion of the competition. Archery also served in the warring states as a standard metaphor for the overall task of self-cultivation. The word for hitting the bullseye was most commonly understood in its metaphoric meaning of the mean of the virtue, and as with virtue, success in archery could only be obtained by a person focused on their his inner state rather than external success, as Luanzhou explains. When it comes to the archery, the gentleman focuses upon his art as a means of illuminating the lessons he has learned and synchronizes his virtue in order to monitor his moral worthiness. He repeatedly bows and defers to others in order to perfect ritual property and venerates the five excellences of archery in order to inspire others to be morally instructed. Competing doesn't at all help one to achieve victory. One must seek for victory within oneself. This is why the etiquette of archery dictates that if you miss the center of the target, turn and look for the cause within yourself. One seeks the bullseye by means of deference and self-cultivation, not for the sake of competing for victory in order to shame others. Thus, we also read, archery is the way of benevolence. If one shoots but doesn't hit the bullseye, one doesn't begrudge one's victorious opponent, but rather simply looks within. Zixia asked, her artful smile with its alluring dimples, her beautiful eyes so clear, the unadorned upon which to paint. What does this mean? The master said the application of colors comes only after a suitable unadorned background is present. Zixia said, so it is the rites that come after? The master said, it is you, Zixia, who has awakened me to the meaning of these lines. It is only with someone like you that I can begin to discuss the others. Again, we have a disciple making the sort of conceptual leap that Confucius required of his students. The point grasped by Zixia is that the adornment provided by the rites is meant to build upon appropriate native emotions or tendencies. Just as all of the cosmetics in the world are of no avail if the basic lines of the face are not pleasing, so is the refinement provided by ritual forms of no help to one lacking in native substance. An even stronger expression of the importance of substance is found in the record of ritual, just as that which is naturally sweet can be further harmonized through cooking, and just as colors may be applied to a white background, so a person who is dutiful and trustworthy can be allowed to learn the rites. Here the virtues of dutifulness and trustworthiness are presented as a native talent that are prerequisites for moral education. The master said, as for the rites of the Xia dynasty, I can speak of them, but there is little remaining in the state of Qi to document them. As for the rites of the Shang dynasty, I can speak of them, but there is a little remaining in the state of Song to document them. This is because there is not much in the way of culture or moral virtues left in either state. If there were something there, then I will be able to document them. Qi was a minor state in which the remnants of Xia royal line were engulfed after their defeat by the Shang, and Song was a state where the remnants of the Shang were engulfed after their defeat by the Zhou. Neither of these states was successful in preserving their cultural traditions. Unlike the state of Lu, the home of the Zhou cultural tradition, where the essence of Zhou culture could still be found. The most cogent interpretation of this passage is that of Zheng Ruxi, who explains, Qi and Song has lost the ritual practices of the Xia and Shang, as evidenced by the fact that there was no remaining culture or moral virtues left in these states that could document these cultures. Lu, on the other hand, was not like this. With regard to culture, it still possessed the classic documents, and with regard to worthiness, it possessed the master. How is it that none of the rulers and ministers of Lu saw fit to examine this evidence? Thus, in making this comment, the master didn't really have Qi or Song in mind, but was instead using the examples of Qi and Song to express his opinion. For it is in fact particularly with regard to Lu that the subtle point of these words are directed. Here again we have a rebuke of the Lu leadership for its neglect or flouting of its cultural heritage. Also compare this passage with a later, slightly elaborated version in the record of ritual. The master said, "As for that part of the sacrifice that comes after the pouring of the ceremonial libation, I have no desire to witness it." There is a great deal of debate over how to understand this passage. There is a general consensus that the sacrifice was a special type of ancestor sacrifice, directed toward the ultimate progenitor of one's ancestral line. Some commentators believe that all aristocratic lines had their own sacrifice that they were authorized to be performed, and that Confucius' disapproval is directed toward the manner in which the sacrifice was being carried out in law, either sloppily or with an usurpation of paraphernalia, music and dance that were properly the prerogative of the Zhou king. Others, citing a line found in 2 chapters of the record of ritual that says, "According to ritual, only a king can perform the deed," argue that the mentioned here is a specific ritual directed to the progenitor of the Zhou royal line and properly performed only in the great ancestral temple of Lu mentioned in 315. The performance of this ceremony under this reading was the sole prerogative of the Zhou royal line. As Schilling puts it, the day is fundamentally a grand sacrifice limited to kings. Both the places in the Right Hall and summary accounts of sacrifices say, because he viewed him as having made the most meritorious contributions in the entire world, King Chang dedicated to the Duke of Zhou an important sacrifice. Thus, he sacrificed the originating progenitor of his line, establishing the ancestral hall of the founding king, where from the beginning the ritual and music appropriate to the Son of Heaven could be performed. However, the various lords began randomly employing this sacrifice. Their action thus fell under the category of ritual violation, and this is why the master had no desire to witness it. This accords completely with the complaint attributed to the master in the ritual usage. The border sacrifice and the as performed in Lu are in violation of ritual. Oh, how the Duke of Zhou's legacy has declined. Someone asked for an explanation of the sacrifice. The master said, "I do not understand it. One who understood it could handle the word as if he had it right here." And he pointed to the palm of his hand. Of course, the unspoken implication is that there is no one in Lu who really understands the deed, especially the 3 families who have been shamelessly performing it in gross violation of ritual norms. The ability of a properly performed ritual, especially those having to do with filial piety, such as the sacrifice to one's ancestors, to order the entire world in Wu-Wei fashion is expressed particularly strongly here, but has parallels in such passages as 1:2, 2:21, and 12:11. Sacrifice as if they were present means that when sacrificing to the spirits, you should comfort yourself as if the spirits were present. The master said, "If I am not fully present at the sacrifice, it is as if I did not sacrifice at all." To sacrifice as if the spirits were present means to do so with an attitude of reverence and awe. There is no attribution for the first line in its form. An expanded version suggests that it might be a fragment from a lost ritual text interpolated by a later editor, Whether the master's words or not, it nonetheless clearly harmonizes with the comment from Confucius that follows. Although some commentators take being present in the second line in its literal sense, the sense of the first line suggests that what is at issue is psychological or inner presence. Wang Sungjia asked, "What do you think about the saying, 'It is better to pay homage to the kitchen stove than the corner shrine'?" The master replied, "This is not so. Once you have incurred the wrath of heaven, there is no one to whom you can pray for help." There are many ways to understand this passage. Taken literally, it's a cynical piece of peasant lore, meaning that it's better to be well fed than to waste food on sacrifices to the ancestors. Despite Confucius' agnosticism concerning the existence of spirits, such a crudely pragmatic argument against ritual traditions would clearly be anathema to him. There are also a host of metaphorical interpretations of the passage that take the folk saying as a coded reference to the current state of affairs in Wei, where the questioner, Wang Sunjia, was a minister. The corner shrine was a traditional located in the southwest corner of one's house and was a specifically venerated location where sacrifices to one's ancestors were carried out. The kitchen stove, on the other hand, was of no particular ritual significance, but was the focus of the family's everyday attention, and was therefore of much more practical importance. Some interpretations argue that the corner shrine refers metaphorically to the respected inner circle of ministers around the Lord of Wei, or to the Lord of Wei himself, who had in fact only nominal power, and that the kitchen stove refers to the real wielder of power in Wei, Wang Sunjia. Under this reading, Wang Sun is advising Confucius, who had just arrived in Wei, to pay homage to him rather than to his nominal superiors. This, however, will be a violation of ritual, and Confucius therefore rebukes him. Other interpretations see this saying as Wang Sun's attempt to justify his abandoning service under the remnants of the Zhou royal line to take up a position with the much more powerful feudal lord of Wei. As Long Zhou explains, the corner shrine is honored, but isn't actually served in practice, whereas the kitchen stove, nominally not worthy of respect, is where one focuses one's attention. At the time, the house of Zhou was weak and in decline, and real power was in the hands of feudal lords. Wang Song gave up service under the Zhou to take up a position under the Wei, and therefore uses this saying as a way to justify his actions to Confucius. Confucius' answer is intent to make it clear that just as there is nothing greater than heaven and the spirits, no one should be honored more than one's king. That is, that one should in fact serve that which one honors in theory and not paying homage to that which is not worthy of respect. The master said, "The Zhou gazes down upon the two dynasties that preceded it. How brilliant in culture it is. I follow the Zhou." The metaphoric image of the Zhou gazing down upon the Xia and Shang dynasties as if from a summit is meant to express the fact that its culture incorporated elements of the cultures that preceded it, presumably the best elements. Lu represented the depository of Zhou culture during Confucius' age, and a related passage in the record of ritual suggests that part of the purpose of this passage is to emphasize the moral and cultural preeminence of Lu among the feudal states of the time, even though Lu was in fact relatively small and comparatively weak politically, economically, and militarily.